Today, we're gonna travel back in time and I'm gonna show you just how to create these vintage inspired photo booth pics like these. That'll have your family and friends wondering if you actually purchased a retro photo booth without having to spend 25 to 30 grand. So dust off your cameras and let's get started. First, I'm gonna show you how I shot this with one light. Then we'll hop on over to the computer and I'll show you the exact editing recipe I used, the overlay graphic, and the frame template. The best thing about this setup is that it's so simple. All right, the first thing I did for this shoot was actually go to Jo-Ann Fabrics and find a baby blue material, and I bought 2 yards of it, came to like $25, I think. And then I bought these curtain rod rings. I slid the rings onto a C-stand and then clipped the material, making sure that there was enough width in between each clip to kind of give it that ribbed curtain look. The nice thing is though, you can also do the same setup with just a white wall, or you could use a curtain you already have at your house. I did use 2 V-flats. You'll see a white V-flat on the left side and a black V-flat on the right side. What I did was I used the black one to kind of add more shadows, and then I used the white one to add a little bit of fill. However, this isn't really needed. You'll still get that same exact look without these. What you could do though is set this up next to a white wall or hang a black curtain next to the subject, but it's definitely not needed. For my light, I used my favorite Profoto D1 strobe, and I had it at about 6.5 power with a white beauty dish attached to it. The beauty dish was just slightly above the model's head and then about 2.5–3 feet away from the model's face. I like using the beauty dish because it gives a really clean light to the face. However, it still keeps those dramatic shadows that you see underneath the chin, which I think is one of the most important parts to making this setup look realistic and vintage. Now, the nice thing is you can really use any light for this setup. You don't have to use a Profoto light. You can use another strobe light, or you could use a consistent light. You could use a lamp. You could really use anything that has a dramatic and harsh light to it that really gives a dramatic shadow underneath the face and a little bit of shadow on the backdrop. I feel like a bare bulbed, constant, or strobe light would actually work really well in this situation because in these vintage photo booth images, the highlights are a little blown out sometimes. So I think that could kind of add to the effect. So by no means do you need any fancy modifier, just use what you have. All right, now let's hop on over to the computer and I'll show you exactly how I edited these and how I really gave it that vintage photo booth look. I'm gonna go over just how I edit in Lightroom, then we'll bring it over into Photoshop for just a few minor tweaks. Then I'll show you the exact overlay and the template I use to make it look like a photo booth strip. All right, so I always start by cropping my images. I love an 8.5 by 11 crop. So I'm gonna put it in pretty tight here to mimic that photo booth look. And then I'm going to straighten it out so that the curtain ribs here are more aligned. Let's see how that looks. All right, it's looking good. I'm gonna get even tighter in. All right, I think this is looking pretty good. All right, let's start with the exposure. I'm gonna bump this up just a tad. I really like kind of having a bright image, especially when we're going into Photoshop and gonna put layers on this. You kind of want the image to be a little bit brighter than it might normally be. Bump up the contrast a bit. Okay. I like to bring the highlights up a lot. The reason is because in old photo booth images, I always feel like the highlights are a little blown out, and that's what gives it kind of that vintage look and vintage feel. I'm also gonna bring up the shadows to like 68. Let's go there. White we're gonna keep the same, but blacks we're gonna drop. Let's see. Drop to about there. Okay, here's where things get a little different. We're gonna drop the texture. I usually go like 20, 25, And then clarity, we're gonna go down like 10. And I bump up the dehaze to about, let's see, 39 maybe? Yeah, that looks about right. All right, next up, we're gonna go down to saturation. So I'm gonna take the reds down quite a bit here, like 50, let's do 52. The orange, I wanna increase just a tad bit, just to bring out a little bit of, I don't know what this is, an orange yellowish. And then blues, let's focus on the blues because this backdrop, I really want it to pop. So we're gonna bump this, let's do like 50. Let's see what that looks like so far. Okay, I'm really liking the color and saturation. Knowing that, you know, we are gonna be putting overlays on this, so. All right, let's play with the color grading a bit. So I just play around. I like to see what works, what doesn't. Sometimes you don't want to get a little too wild, but honestly, I'm a visual person. I like to look and see like when I'm making adjustments, what is it doing to my image? All right, sharpening, we're not gonna do anything there. I always like to uncheck enable profile corrections if it's on. Usually with shooting with my Canon, it is on. Then let's see, I'm gonna add some grain as well because there's always a little bit of grain in a photo booth image. Okay. All right, now that we're in Photoshop, let's add just a tad bit more before we put on the photo booth overlay. So I'm going to open this up and go to adjustments, and I like levels. I want to play a little bit more with this dramatic highlight, bring in some contrast, some darker shadows. Okay, that looks about good. Let's go to my curves, see what this does. Just a little more contrast, a little more highlights. Okay, it's looking a little blown out in the highlights right now, but that's okay. We're going to fix that with the overlay. All right, so this is my... All right, now let's grab the film overlay. So what you do is I choose Command A, which will select the whole image, and then Command C on a Mac, or just copy. Go back to our image, and we're going to paste it right on here. Now I'm on a Mac, so I do Command T, and we're just going to transform this a bit to make it cover the whole entire image. And hit enter. Okay, now I like to go to these blending modes. Now, there's so much you can do with blending modes, and I want people to be able to get creative with this. So I would just go through, and every time I edit an image, I honestly go through each and every one of these just to see how the overlay looks on that photo with that edit. But we want something that's really gonna show that overlay, but not harden the image too much. So I'm thinking I like this hard light, but it might be just a tad bit overwhelming. Let's drop it down to 90 fill, 92 opacity. Okay. That is looking pretty good. Now, you could just leave this here. If you would, I would maybe drop this curves. You know what? I'm actually just gonna delete that. I like the way that looks. What's levels doing? I like the levels. So this looks like a great color vintage photo booth, but we're now going to make it even a little bit more retro. Let's go to hue saturation. We're gonna bring down the saturation all the way. So once it's black and white, you can play it. You can get even more dramatic with your edits. I want to keep the highlights pretty bright and the shadows pretty dark. All right, I'm really liking how this edit is going. So from Lightroom, we turned it black and white, did a few curves, few levels, added a photo booth screen on top of it. But there's just one more part to this. We're gonna open up my photo booth strip. This just mimics a film strip. So what we're gonna do is save this photo. Now, once it's saved, we're gonna go over to our photo booth strip and we're going to open up the image we just saved. We're gonna open this up, Command A, Command C to copy and paste it, go to the photo booth and hit Command V. I'm gonna hit Command T to transform this. And I like to make sure the photo is underneath the film layer. And then I'm gonna put it exactly where I want it. There you have it. So now if you had multiple images, I would put different images here, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to copy and paste. And there you have it, a photo booth strip. You can also take this layer and if you want, go to the adjustments and turn it black and white too. I kind of like the little bit of saturation in it. And there you go. As always, I hope this video was helpful. And let me know in the comments below if you're gonna give this lighting setup a try. Thanks for watching.